The energy inside the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was buzzing, just like any other night. The lights were hot, the audience was loud, and Jimmy was in his element cracking jokes, riffing on politics, and warming up the crowd before the cameras rolled for the night's featured guest. But this wasn't just another Hollywood actor or a viral TikTok star. Tonight's guest was former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, known for her tough as-nails demeanor and unapologetically conservative viewers expected sparks. What they didn't expect was the firestorm that would erupt. Jimmy Kimmel, known for being sharp, sarcastic, and quick on his feet, thought he knew how this interview would go. He'd poke a little fun at her politics, she'd push back, and they'd end on a note of fake civility. It's a dance he'd done before, but as Pam Bondi walked on stage, her confidence radiating, something in her body language signaled that she wasn't just here to spar. She was here to flip the script. After the usual applause and polite greetings, Jimmy kicked things off with a half-joking jab. "So, Pam, what brings you from the land of sunshine, hurricanes, and unpredictable elections to our humble little blue bubble in LA?" The audience chuckled. Bondi smiled, but the glint in her eyes told a different story. "Well, Jimmy," she replied smoothly, "I figured it was time we had a conversation. You talk a lot about accountability, right?" Kimmel raised an eyebrow, intrigued but wary. "Sure, that's part of the job. Hold power to account. Call out nonsense." "Great," Bondi said, crossing her legs. "Because tonight, we're going to talk about your nonsense." The audience reacted with a mix of laughter and confusion. Jimmy laughed too nervously. "Okay, what are we doing here? An intervention?" Bondi leaned forward just slightly. Her voice was steady, calm, even pleasant, but what she said next caused the air in the room to shift. "You've spent years mocking politicians, calling people out for things they said decades ago, digging through their pasts and roasting them for every misstep. But I'm curious, who holds you accountable, Jimmy? Who reminds you of your past?" Jimmy's smile faltered. He leaned back slightly, trying to keep his cool. "Pam, I'm a comedian. That's kind of what we do. It's satire." "That's a convenient label," she countered. "But satire doesn't give you a pass to wear blackface on national television, or to make jokes about women that even you admitted were in poor taste. You've apologized, sure. But when someone like me comes on this show, suddenly I'm fair game, and you're the moral authority." The laughter in the crowd stopped dead. A few gasps echoed. The silence was thick. Jimmy cleared his throat, grasping for a response. "Look, I've said things I regret. I've talked about it publicly. People evolve. That's the whole point, right?" "Growth." Bondi didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her control of the moment was absolute.
"And why haven't
you given that same grace to others? Why do some people get crucified on your stage while you move on like nothing ever happened?" There it was. Not a soundbite, not a shout. A direct challenge wrapped in calm delivery. And it landed. Kimmel opened his mouth, then closed it. The studio lights, usually flattering and familiar, now felt scorching. He took a sip from his mug, buying a few seconds to think. The audience looked on, some stunned, some waiting for the host to recover with a signature punchline. But it didn't come. He looked at her not as a rival, not as a political opponent, but as a person who had just turned his own rules back on him. "Pam," he said, attempting to steady himself. "I've made a career out of making fun of myself too. I've never claimed to be perfect. People know that." "But perfection's not what I'm asking for," she replied. "Just consistency. If you're going to sit in that chair every night and judge everyone else, you've got to be willing to sit in the hot seat." The crowd remained silent, no laughter, no applause. Just the rarest thing in late-night television. Tension, not the funny kind, the real kind. Jimmy tried to pivot with humor, but the timing was off. The punchline fell flat. For the first time in a long while, he looked out at the audience and saw not adoring fans, but people watching intensely, quietly, waiting to see what he would do next. And for Jimmy Kimmel, a man who built his brand on controlling the moment, that loss of control was written all over his now pale face. The silence that followed lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Jimmy Kimmel sat a little straighter in his chair, blinking, swallowing hard, trying to regain his footing in what had become an unexpectedly intimate and public reckoning. This wasn't a political spat. It was something deeper. Something uncomfortably honest. Asterisk Pam, he finally said, his voice lower than usual, less performative. You're not wrong. Asterisk, a ripple moved through the crowd like a collective exhale. Even Bondi seemed momentarily surprised at the shift in tone. But she didn't interrupt. Asterisk, I've made mistakes. I've said things I shouldn't have, he continued. Some of them were stupid. Some were offensive. Some I thought were funny back then, but wouldn't even think of repeating now. He paused, rubbing his hands together slowly. And yeah, I've apologized. Publicly. Multiple times. But I guess you're asking me why I didn't go further. Why I didn't have a moment like this. Bondi gave a small nod, her face unreadable. Well, maybe because moments like this don't happen often. Not on this stage, not in front of cameras, and maybe that's the problem. Asterisk, the crowd was hanging on his every word. No punchlines, no clever edits, just raw conversation. The man who once built a wall of irony between himself and the world was now speaking from behind it. Exposed. Asterisk, Pam leaned back slightly, arms crossed, watching him. People in positions like yours, Jimmy, people with big platforms, you influence millions. And it's not about canceling anyone. It's about showing that accountability isn't a one-time apology on Twitter. It's ongoing. It's uncomfortable. And it has to be public if your harm was public. Asterisk, Jimmy nodded slowly. I hear that. And I think it's a fair point. I've made a living pointing fingers. But maybe I haven't always looked in the mirror as hard as I should have. Asterisk, you're not the only one, Pam said. We all fall short. But what people want now isn't just apologies, they want truth, vulnerability. They want to see that people can grow without pretending they were always the good guy. Asterisk, Jimmy let her words settle before responding. You know, I've joked before about how I was once the man show guy, and how I cringe looking back, and the truth is I do. But maybe I've leaned too hard into comedy as a shield. Maybe I've been afraid that if I drop the act completely, people will just walk away. Asterisk, Pam's voice softened just a touch. Or maybe they'll respect you more. Asterisk, the audience applauded lightly, no standing ovation. No cheering, just the kind of clapping that says we see you. Jimmy glanced around the room, visibly moved. Asterisk, you caught me off guard tonight, he said. I thought I was bringing you on for a debate, not a therapy session. Asterisk, Bondi smirked. Sometimes they're the same thing. Asterisk, the tension in the room began to ease. The temperature cooled, not with jokes, but with mutual recognition to people from entirely different worlds sharing a rare, honest moment. And perhaps even more surprising was the fact that neither tried to dominate the narrative. There was no winner here, just a real exchange. Asterisk, Kimmel leaned forward again. I appreciate you calling me out. I really do. Because you're right. If I want to hold others accountable, I can't ask to be the exception. And maybe conversations like this are the start of something better, something more human. Asterisk, Bondi nodded. That's all most people are asking for. Asterisk, Jimmy looked down for a beat, then back up at her. I'll tell you what, if you're ever free again, come back, no jokes, no script, just more of this. Asterisk. Pam raised an eyebrow. You sure you want the smoke? Asterisk, the crowd finally erupted in laughter. Genuine, cathartic. Jimmy smiled, for real this time. Asterisk, I think I can handle it, he said. Asterisk, as the segment wrapped, the closing music began to play. But the usual levity was replaced with something more grounded. The audience gave both of them a long, thoughtful round of applause, not just for entertainment, but for courage, for discomfort, for the rare moment when a late-night talk show stopped being a stage and started becoming a mirror. Asterisk, backstage. Producers buzzed nervously about how the segment would be received, but Kimmel remained calm. The storm had passed, and though his face had indeed gone pale during the confrontation, by the end of it, there was color again, not just in his cheeks, but in his tone. Humbled, reflective, changed. Perhaps in a small but important way. Asterisk, and as Bondi exited the stage with poise, a producer whispered, that was ... intense. Asterisk, she smiled. No, it was honest.